And we're back with Insight Club. Today, talking about assumptions around control. Stay tuned.
The first rule of Insight Club is you don't talk about Insight Club. You do Insight Club. The second rule of Insight Club is the only assumptions we make about one another are that we all want happiness and we all want to avoid suffering. The third rule of Insight Club is you check all your other assumptions at the door. We hope these conversations will bring you insights that incite you to action. Welcome to Insight Club. So where is your mind?
My mind is still on the topic that you brought for today. And one of the things that we talked about, you mentioned control and mastery.
Yeah.
And in my mind, my assumptions around mastery are different than control. So maybe we could even start with that.
Yeah, mastery for me can go either way because sometimes the connotations around are like being the master and power over. And then there's the sense of mastery where, I've practiced this instrument, for years and I do it every day and I have mastery and I walk in the energy or like I exist in the energy of that thing. I don't have to try. It's like it's not separate from me. So for me, it can go either way.
Yeah, for me, it's that idea that I have from mastery is that idea of like being effortless because you've done it so much and you merge so much with the thing that it's not separate from you anymore. You have total ability with that. Where control, it can go both ways. When you talk about self control, there's good and bad sides of it, but when it goes on control over others, it can be a little bit more complicated. But we can also think of control and mastery in the sense of, for example, uh, let's use a speaker, for example, with the crowd. Some speakers, you could say that, oh, they have control over the crowd, like they speak in an eloquent way, and it's not using control in a sense of like they're controlling them, they're forcing, they're coercing, like you said as well. It's more in the sense of that they are mastering the space, right? They are controlling the energy in the environment. But that's the kind of thing where I would tend to use mastery instead of control.
I'm right there with you. And what's crystallizing for me as you're speaking is that I think there's something about control that's always temporary. So self-control is a good thing if in the moment I have an impulse that wouldn't be effective, wouldn't be like morally okay, would be harmful in some way, right? Like the thought comes up and I want to say the thing and I have control. Sure, that can have like a short-term positive effect because I don't, do the thing that causes some harm. But what I would prefer to build is mastery, self-mastery, where I don't even have the impulse. I don't feel like I have to hold on to something tightly. So I think control is definitely a helpful social tool, a social technology. But I think that mastery, the more I'm hearing us, like use it in this way, even though initially I was like, mastery is the same as control. You're opening my eyes to that mastery is merging with the thing. I love the way you said that. So I become in the state, I become the person. I no longer have to control myself to not go get the chocolate bar and eat it. I have the self mastery where I go, oh, maybe the impulse arises, but then it goes away. Like I'm just going, no, thank you. Right. I'm not having a rigid holding on to try to prevent the thing. And that's the reason I think control is temporary because it takes a huge energetic force. It really does feel like I'm gripping something as tightly as I can. I'm pressing myself against the door so that the wind doesn't blow it in. It's like, how long can I keep up my strength to do that?
That's a great way of putting it. Like, it's a waste of energy because you need to exert so much energy to control either yourself or others or a situation or a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where mastery becomes, I can even relate to the example that you gave with an instrument, for example.
Yeah.
When you're trying to control what you're playing, or even in singing, the tendency is that it is more rigid and it is harder. But when it is that that thing that you have mastered it, you have mastered a song, or you have mastered whatever it is, then it becomes effortless, and it's a lot different than control. Like, you're not trying to reach a certain note. You're not looking at your fingers to see if you're playing the right thing.
Yeah.
You're just really merging with it, flowing with it.
Yeah. So then if we bring this idea of like the distinction between control and mastery to trying to have control over something or someone, whether it's ourselves or others, I think there's also something inherent in control about division into subject and object, even if it's with ourselves. And we were chatting offline about this idea of excess that doesn't serve us, and we would find ourselves in times of excess, and then we get the results, we get the hangover, we get the tummy ache, whatever it is. We're like, oh, that really didn't serve me. For me, that excess is kind of the explosive moment of uh heightened, like maximum division between the me who's trying to control and the me I am trying to control. And so it's like, I'm going to be good, I'm not going to do the thing, I'm not going to be tempted, I'm going to be good, I'm going to. And then eventually there's that rebellion. It's like, I'm going to eat everything, I'm going to dance naked in the streets and pour jelly on myself. It's like we see these extremes. And you were talking about this in the context of Carnival, Mardi Gras, which is, Fat Tuesday, whatever is the language that we're familiar with, which is when we're recording it just past last week. Followed by, if you participate in the tradition, these 40 days of like stringency and taking things away. And I was actually thinking about the positive of that because Aquarian Women's Leadership Society right now is like doing a March Ayurvedic cleanse with like different levels of investment. It could be like I'm just doing the pranayama and I'm drinking lemon water, or it could be like I'm doing a full Ayurvedic thing. And so there is something, I think, that's healthful and moving towards and beautiful about this time of year, going, how can I just create a little more space, a little lightness, moving things through? So that might be the positive part of Lent, of the taking away. But in popular culture, it's really represented as I'm giving things up, I'm taking away, and it's coming after this massive excess. And so it's like in the seesaw of self-control, where I went to the maximum in one direction and the maximum in the other direction. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
It's law of polarity, right? If you have too much self-control, that there it will get to a point where the shadow needs to have a space to go. Like, if we hold too much on this side, it's going to spill too much on the other side, and that's just what it is. If we I feel like maybe that's the part where mastery can be a lot different, because if we had mastery, we wouldn't have to control. We would be able to know when it's time to loosen a little bit, when it's time to hold a little bit more, and maybe even shifting the perspective. Because, yeah, we talked about Carnival and Mardi Gras and so on, and even prior to that, there was Saturnalia, which also was this kind of time, which was around Christmas, by the way. So
Yeah. Yeah.
another time where people get a little bit more in the excesses, um, where it is that space to do all the things that you wouldn't allow yourself to do in other times of the year, right? Um, and the more we try to control, the more we tend to feel like, oh, now I deserve to do the wrong things because I've been a good girl all these years, all these months, and so on. Yet, I was thinking of Lent as you were talking about, and how that is also uh, not just that complete opposite, but a perspective. The perspective over it is in a way that makes you want to go to the other side, right? It If we see this as punishment, if we see that as I need to cut away the things that I enjoy and that I want, and this is like I'm giving away all the things that I truly love, of course nobody's gonna like it, and we're gonna feel more attracted to the shadows, more attracted to carnival, or now I can do everything, or I can whatever it is. um but that's one perspective. The other perspective is when the prior thing with Lent would be um fasting, right?
Yeah. That
So if
cleansing, that renewal. Yeah.
cleansing, renewal.
Yeah.
And if we think of that cleansing, that either if it's fasting, or these days could be using less your phone,
Mhm.
maybe, right? um, Giving up on some vices, um, and trying to use this time as, oh, now this is a good time to find mastery over myself.
Yeah.
Then it could be, instead of a feeling of punishment, an opportunity to connect more with yourself and connect more with something higher, either if you call it God or universe or whatever you call, because all these practices were used to be the most clear channel possible to be able to connect and to be able to have a higher energy to achieve bigger things.
Yeah. That is a really helpful highlight for me, that there is so much incentive for people who want to have control over others to discourage self mastery
Yeah.
and encourage self control. So they're like two different currencies, they're two different energies. And the more somebody wants to have control over me, the more they're trading in the currency of control. So they want to tell me about this diet plan that's going to, help me control my cravings, not master them. They want to sell me, and like the irony of this, an app for my phone that will help me use my phone less because it will control. Right?
Yes.
And I I really find it helpful to see these two different forces, these two different energies, these two different currencies in the world, that whenever I'm participating in mastery, and I love that I went like in the space of a few minutes from like, oh no, master is the same thing as control, to like, oh no, these are different. Like anytime I'm participating in mastery, I'm adding more of that currency and that energy to the world. And so it's like for me here, I already have something that I want to be an insight action, which is to pay attention to any time I feel like I need to be in control of myself, or I want to be in control of myself, or I want to be in control of others. And you brought the image of the speaker with the crowd and somebody who has that mastery and their energy is in the space creating influence. And yet I'm imagining each of the people in the audience is still in their autonomy, is still in their able to be like in their highest self, is not just being like activated in their anger. It's not like a direct line to the anger center of the brain. I'm not turning on your amygdala and being like, get into a frenzy, right? That's also something that we see. That's also a power that maybe goes into the control side of things. But that mastery of myself spills out into my energy just being so compelling in a space, which leads to other people wanting to get into that stream with me, and yet having full choice. Like, does this really take me to a place that feels like in alignment versus a switch being flipped and they're frenzied. So I'm like, this feels like the solution to so many things.
Yeah. Maybe we can even think that those who can't achieve mastery would try to seek control.
I think that's absolutely the case. It's very frightening to feel out of control, and especially if we don't really have much facility with mastery, if we don't have somewhere in our life where we, have experienced the merging that is mastery, then everything feels like it's beyond us. And so we're like the drowning person who is is making other people drown too, because we're just looking for something to hang on to, and we're pulling other people's like, I'm panicking, so let me hold on to you. And you're like, but now you're pulling me down.
Yeah.
And when we look at this in the social sphere, I mean, I feel like we see it everywhere. I notice this a lot with adult and children dynamic. And I follow a lot of conscious parenting
Mm.
experts. It's just a topic I really am passionate about and I enjoy hearing about. And it's so interesting to me to hear the pushback against it. And the pushback often sounds like, well, kids just need to obey, right? And often what's very interesting, often the pushback is, well, your kids are being disrespectful. When you told your child to do that and they, didn't and gave you reasons why and started a conversation, they're being disrespectful. And I would say, no, they're not being controllable, but we've equated control with respect. And,
Mm.
so it's like, I see the child doing the thing I told them to do. That's respect. Like, it could be. Or it could just be that it coercion and you control them and you're bigger than they are. And then what happens when you're no longer bigger and stronger than they are? But that's an area where we have this kind of, I think, weird dissociation, because we think control is okay to do to children, but then consciously we would say, no, it's not okay just to coerce people. You have to, or maybe some people do think it's okay to coerce others, but it kind of starts, I don't know, this idea of needing to control. Maybe it doesn't start with how we treat children in society, but I think it's
Mhm.
played out there a lot and then has a ripple effect. And then maybe it's like, I'm controlling myself. I mean, who knows where it starts? Like, I'm controlling myself, so I'm going to control you, or like maybe vice versa. But the average person, I would say, would answer if you ask them, like, is it okay to just get other people to do what you want through violence and coercion? They'd probably be like, no, that's not, that's not morally right. But then isn't that exactly what we do to children? And isn't that kind of how we run politics?
Yeah. I- It's that thing that we talked about, right? If everyone obeys me, then we can have a democracy.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That would be so great to put on a t-shirt. So I was behind a car recently and it had a bumper sticker that said, "Become ungovernable." And
I
I well, I made a lot of assumptions based on the kind of car it was and where I live and all of these things. And so my assumption, which may have been wrong, is that what this person meant is like, like don't tread on me and we're going to be so unruly you won't be able to govern us. So I may be wrong about that, but that was my assumption. And then my first thought was, I wonder if that person has children, and if so, how they treat their children. Because if their children acted in such a way as to be ungovernable, I bet they'd be annoyed to no end. Right? Like, so it's this double standard, right? So on the
Yeah.
one hand, it's like what makes us free is being like, you can't control me. I'm going to, do the things that are according to what I think is best. And that has a lot of positivity in it, has a lot of reactivity in it too. And just in the context of the world we live in. But there's a lot of positivity in that. But I'm like, how would you feel if the people you were trying to govern were so independent as to be ungovernable, right? Most parents would go like, no, that's not okay for kids to do. You're being disrespectful. So how can we ever learn? This is like, let me try to bring it together. How can we learn self-mastery in a culture where our very first experience and then our continuing experience is control? Do it because I said so. Do it because I'm bigger than you. Do it because there are consequences if you don't do it. Like, where do we have the opportunities to learn self mastery as opposed to the world looks like top down control? And so, therefore, internally, it also is like just control. It's all about control.
Yeah. Wow. I'm thinking about it because we talked about polarity with Carnival and Lent and so on, and actually we have that within ourselves as well. We have both the good and the bad. We have the angel and the demon all within us, and that's a reason why we do need to learn self control or self mastery rather, um, because we have the ability to be bad and really bad. All humans have that ability, and anyone who says that no, I'm just good, I would never do this or never do that, they're either lying or not self-aware enough.
Yeah.
Because if you look deep in within yourself, you know you're capable of terrible things. Jordan Peterson talks about it's not about being the good guy or the good girl. It's about knowing the monster within and knowing how to master the monster.
Mm.
Because then when you actually know yourself and you know your shadows, yourself deep enough, like Jung would say as well, then you're free to do whatever you want, right? So if we have that duality within ourselves and everyone searched for the truth, searched to be more aware of themselves, then we wouldn't need someone telling us what to do. Everyone would be able to govern themselves instead of being governed. We know that's not exactly how the world works today. And there are moments where everyone needs to follow certain rules to be able um, to work together. We can see this in transit, for example. If anyone would drive any way they want, that would be a chaos and no one would get anywhere.
Right.
So, of course, having a set of rules where everyone agrees to follow in this way so that everyone can get what is best for everyone, it's good,
Yeah.
right?
You, you, oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yet, I feel like the more we can remove that need of controlling, where it's not really necessary for l- living together to make things work, the better, because there's no need to rule where one is not interfering on the other.
Yeah. So you brought a couple things. You mentioned freedom, and we touched a lot about this on a previous episode, but the idea of like our ideas around freedom, our assumptions around freedom can get kind of muddled. And so I love the way you phrased it, which was like, when we have that knowledge of the monster within our capacities, or like our shadow, our our activations, our triggers, or like, what are the things that are gonna, easily lead me into not highest self and make me feel, self-righteous. And be like, yeah, I've got the right to do this and but it's, driven by not highest self. We sometimes think of that as freedom, and going back to the, the excess and the, the Mardi Gras thing. It's like, yeah, I'm free to do whatever I want. It's like, but which part of you wants that? Whereas you said true freedom comes from knowing that darkness within and having the mastery to, not to be led by it. And that's a practice. And isn't it interesting slash sinister slash sad that there are so many practices we could be doing to build mastery and to familiarize ourselves, like to even just build like that neural network in the brain of like, what does it feel like to merge with the thing, to trust it, to be in mastery, whether I'm doing yoga or I'm playing an instrument, or I'm cooking, or I'm speaking to people, whatever it is. Like, there are so many ways we could teach the cultivation of mastery, and what we choose culturally to teach instead is control.
Yeah.
And the more, you always need more control, because then you're increasing the difference between the two polarities, right? And so it's like, now I feel more and more pressure and more controlled, and so the part of me who wants to rebel against that just keeps growing stronger and stronger.
I love something that you said earlier, that the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. And maybe the practice is exactly that. Where can we practice not suppressing, not controlling, but finding the mastery? Because as long as we don't find mastery by controlling, right?
Yeah.
Control is part of it. Of course, we might need to start with some control to be able to find the perfect level of
Yeah. It
things.
can be
But
the scaffolding. It can be the training wheels on the bicycle. Yeah.
yeah, but if we always try to control and we don't actually let loose to be able to see where it could go when you're not controlling, where it's loose, when it's free, then we don't have the we can't gauge what's the potential in here, right? And I'm not
Mm.
saying just go be crazy and fine, but I'm I'm relating this to vocal training, for
Okay.
example. um a lot of singers just try to control to reach the higher notes, to reach everything and do it perfectly and so on. But a lot of my growth, and that I see with a lot of people as well, and that my teacher now as well teaches, uh, was from actually doing the that really letting go and trying different sounds that are not necessarily beautiful, but like seeing where your voice can get, like not trying to sing perfectly, not trying to hit the note or anything, just growl and scream or do the more sounds and mimic sounds, try everything possible, because then you have the ability to see all the possibilities that you have, all the places within yourself that you haven't even tried, because you are trying to fit that scale perfectly within a song. And then when you go and try to do something more like within a form, you know yourself better to be able to do those things without feeling like, oh, the note is coming, the note is coming, I need. And then you try to control and you totally break it because you don't, you're carrying fear to do the thing. It comes from, it doesn't come from a place of, I get to do this beautiful thing. It comes from a place of, if I get it wrong, it's terrible.
That's so beautiful. I'm thinking of the directive, know thyself. And this idea of like to know what it is inside of you. And with the vocal expression, there's nothing that's moral one way or the other. It's simply about, knowing the entirety of what's there. But I'm thinking about there's a trope that often happens in literature and in movies where the nemesis will, like, the antagonist will try to defeat the protagonist by going like, you want to kill me, right? Like the superheroes facing off against the supervillain who's like, come on, I'm defenseless, kill me, you want to kill me. And what's happening there is the supervillain is trying to awaken the unmastered monster within the superhero. But if the superhero knows herself, right? If she's like, oh, I know. I know this monster. I have danced with this monster. I have partied with this monster. Then that power is impotent. Like, so that came up when you were talking about like just knowing what sounds you can make, what's inside of you. So it's this like, if I know what's inside of me, that is mastery. And that means somebody else can't awaken my monster and control it, which is what we do see with the speaker or the leader who whips the crowd into a frenzy and is like, oh, you're mad about this? Well, guess whose fault it is, and it's like, this guy, grab your torches and your pitchforks, and, we're going to form the mob. But if I have that knowledge of my own monstrosity and therefore like I've merged with it and I've mastered it, it's like you can't use that to make me do something I don't want to do, dude. Yeah. That's my big insight for the day. Like that is why it's so important for me to cultivate mastery, because I've experienced this so many times that my inner monster gets hijacked by something I hear because I have a wound there, I have a hurt there, I have an agitation there, right? And so then I hear the thing and I'm like, yeah, that's right. And now I feel self-righteous and we should, make a law where somebody can't do that, and it's like, oh, you just hijacked my monster.
And goes back to that thing that we talked about already as well, of the insecurity, right?
Yeah.
If we know our shadows and our light, if someone points something to us, we're not gonna get triggered by it or feel like, if it's true, we're gonna be like, yeah, you're right, I have that within me. And if it's not true, we're just gonna be like, this is more about you than about me.
Yeah. you must be thinking of somebody else. I think you have me confused with somebody else.
I had people say that, oh, you must be jealous and stuff, and I'm like, you just told, I don't say, but I think you just told me what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Now I know.
That's so brilliant.
Because if it doesn't really resonate with you, we can be sure that it's about the other person.
Yeah. And or sometimes it's that lag. I have I've got lots of examples of people say something to me with love and I'm like, no, that can't be it. Can it be? Oh, yeah.
Oh
That was
yeah,
it.
but when we have that, that's because it resonated. You might feel like, oh, that, and that happened to me as well. It
Yeah,
happened
the
to
lag time.
moments where someone says something, and then I feel like, uh, yeah, probably there's something here that I'm not seeing. But if you listen to that and you're just like, doesn't even touch
Yeah,
you.
it goes right past. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be doing some work with a new practitioner, and she sent this form to fill out, and it was one of the most amazing, like, experiences of self-awareness I've ever had because the way the questions were framed, it just immediately, but without overwhelming emotion, brought to the surface, okay, what is my belief around that? So these, like, it was, questions about these core things, like, what are your beliefs around forgiveness? What are your beliefs around love? What are your And I found myself able to name the shadow in this really neutral, helpful way where it was like,
Mm,
oh, yeah, I recognize that I believe. And I kept writing, I believe. And it wasn't, I believe, it wasn't like, I think we should do this. It wasn't like, I want to make a banner and go lead a parade on this. It was, oh, I recognize that at a root level, I believe, that like money has strings attached, right? These things that I'm like, I don't care to hold on to that belief, but I recognize I have it. And
mm,
I mean, it was a phenomenal experience to just have that chance to neutrally, lovingly look at my monsters.
yeah. Yeah. It's so freeing when we recognize the things, because then we can work on them if we feel like we need to, or embrace them
Yeah.
in their own place,
Just
right?
even being aware of like, oh, okay, so when a situation comes up, I'm feeling this way. That's the shadow part of me, but I'm not going to mistake it for, because for me, the most unsettling thing, the thing I like the least about the human experience is when I follow the darkness and pretend to myself and to other people that it's justified, that it's righteousness, that it's the light.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm going to mess up. I know I'm going to make mistakes. I know I'm going to, like, if I overreact to something and then I'm like, well, I really overreacted. I'm sorry about that. That's fine. I can easily move on from that. But the things that hurt me significantly are when I get hijacked and I'm like, but I'm so right about this. Like, this is a truth, And I'm like, no, it wasn't. That was a pain.
Yeah.
So even just knowing, like, okay, that's coming up. Oh, that's my belief around money again. That's my belief around forgiveness again. Like, okay, I can I can be with that in a much more easeful way.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm, yeah.
What's your big insight coming up around
We
all
talk
this?
about so many now. Hmm. I I think you already pointed a few, and I would think, like, moving forward, one of the things that stood with me was looking more, where are the shadows that I still want to find mastery over, because we always have more. As long as we're humans and we are alive, we always have more to master. I think very few people might be able to say that they're total masters over themselves, if any. So I think that's one thing, like finding the point of opportunity, like you were saying, like when the monster is taking over, and I can see, okay, how can I master the situation instead of trying to control the situation?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to spend some time. I'm not sure what would be like a helpful practice around that for me, because I want to be paying attention to that difference as well and asking how can I be in mastery around this as opposed to control. Um, but maybe the first part of that is allowing for it to be control and going like, oh, thank you. It's like the safety shut off. A car has an emergency brake,
Mhm.
right? And you'll break your transmission if you are driving and you're like, gas, emergency brake, right? Like it's not sustainable. But if I'm, about to like slam into something or my car is going to roll down a hill, like sure, I'll pull that. Or my car is just a button. It's not very satisfying. When I was growing up, this big lever you would pull.
One practice that I was thinking as we were planning the workshop was the practice of stopping when things are not right and having a escape plan. So for example, you can say just 1 minute, I need to go to the bathroom. And if you need to shake, yell, do whatever you need to do. But allowing myself or anyone who needs this to have a moment to not suppress but to put it out in any way that needs to come out, and then come back to whatever it is that created the problem. Because I feel like I suppressed things so many times that my body felt. And even though I don't like suppressing anything, I feel like putting it out in the situation sometimes just create more problems.
Yeah.
So if you have escape plan for these moments is a good thing.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. You just gave me another huge insight, which is that uh, I can control the environment in which I express it rather than trying to control the expression completely.
Yeah.
That feels like a really beautiful pathway from control to mastery because that means my control's not going to harm me, but I'm also not going to just be like, I'm going to say whatever I want. It always cracks me up when somebody's like, I'm into radical honesty, and then they insist on telling you things that are like not necessary to the situation but just mean spirited, and you're like, radical honesty doesn't have to be the same thing as I feel like you should do things the way I want you to, so I'm just gonna like tell you everything I don't like about what you're doing currently.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be mean.
Yeah, or it's like there's nothing you can do about that. Like
Yeah.
that's not helpful, right? You didn't
Yeah.
do the check-in like, is it necessary? Is it kind? What are those questions, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's gonna be my insight homework is
Mm.
to give myself escape routes and think ahead and plan escape routes. Whew, yeah. I'm not sure what that would look like for some situations that I've been encountering, but it's a good practice. Because I was in a situation earlier this week where I felt it was not okay for me to disagree. And so I was suppressing my disagreement about things that feel really important to me. And felt, I mean, like my jaw hurt afterwards because I just was setting my mouth in a like fake smile of like, everything is fine. I wasn't speaking for this time, but I had to be present. And I was like, this is not, on the rest of the day, my jaw was just like, ow. Like, that's not helping me. It was control in the sense that I did not create any waves in the situation, but it didn't feel like a good solution. So that I'll think of some exit strategies around that.
Yeah, I've been in situations like that. I'm always now trying to find ways to not engage if possible.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that's something that I feel like we learned with Kendrick as well. Like when you get a bad email that stirs some emotion, don't respond within 24 hours. Like wait, let it sit. And that's how I've been feeling with situations where it steers emotions as well. Like, you don't have to respond in the moment. You can take time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And in this situation, it's not necessary even to respond ever at all. Like, I'm fine with that, but I'm thinking even in that moment, if I had chosen to just do, like, deep diaphragm breathing
Mhm.
as opposed to, clenching, that would have been helpful for me, which is what I did recently when I was at the dentist, and I get all this anxiety around going to the dentist, and I breathed through it and was continually like, "My teeth are healthy." I was repeating all of these mantras, and, I experienced far less pain than I was
Yeah.
expecting to. So that's a good thing for me to hold in mind. Like, in both cases, it didn't feel like it was possible for me to go like, "Hold on, I'm leaving for a minute."
Yeah.
But I can choose to be present with my breath and be present with my thoughts and choose those thoughts. Okay, yay, escape plan formed. Thank you.
Perfect.
I love it. Cool. Well,
Mhm.
it'd be great to hear from anybody listening. What are your thoughts on control mastery? How do these words impact you? Do you have a different take on them than we've been talking about? And what's your insight? What sparks for you in this conversation?
Yes. Looking forward to hear from you. And until next time, take care.
Take care and take action.
Take action.